It is the Rotoballer PGA show, and we are joined by you. I'm joined by my main man. The reason for me actually finally getting to bust out this $100 bill shirt of mine that I long to do on my own show, I long to do 6 times a year at least. Spencer Aguiar to my left or right hits his 4th outright of 2024 season. It's the 5th of the show. Spencer, you're doing amazing. How amazing are you doing?
I appreciate that, Byron. It's kind of like we talk about on this show. Like, you and I are not two people that have a ton of exposure in the outright market every single week. So last week was about as aggressive as you will ever see me get in that sector. And it was one of the reasons I talked about it. And I think you and I did a great job of breaking down that tournament from top to bottom to begin with. But we both kind of came up with the same answer that Rory and Lowry, like whether you had the bet or not on it, Byron, like it was their combination of being able to, first of all, alternate shot, great pairing together, all the strengths of the one, the weaknesses of the other, and they were able to merge that together to really make sense. And I think for best ball format, it was another situation where one guy was able to salvage on the one end, and when you needed birdies, they got it. It was a very weird Sunday from them. It was a very weird week. Like every single time they got close, they kept falling apart. And very shocking that 25 under even got them into a playoff. I was thinking that it would be more in like the 28, 29, 30 under range to win. But obviously it's nice when you hit. It wasn't one of my biggest exposures for a bet. Usually bet to win 7 or 8, only bet to win 4, but hit the matchup play that we talked about on this show. I keep having this bad luck, and it's something that we've talked about. And it's like you can't have everything break your way every single week. So it is what it is with it. But these placement bets have been brutal for me on Sunday. Like Smotherman and Meisner went in reverse to miss the top 20. There was a Svensson bet earlier in the year. We've had Fitzpatrick and English at the Masters, like keep missing by 1 or 2 spots. So as great as this year has been, and I think we're at about 23, 24 units up, somewhere in that range right now. If you just turn a couple of those results around, like this could be 35, 40 units up. So I'm very pleased where the matchups are, very pleased where the outrights are. The placement bets have been a different animal, but it's always nice to hit a winner.
Spence, let's just get into that right off the bat before we kind of get into this week's contest and CJ Cup, Byron Nelson Aguiar Invitational Classic, presented to you by Rotoballer PGA Show. Use code TOFF for 10% off. But the thing about placement bets is the long term. Like, what would you define long term as? Because for me, it would probably be 6 months to a year. Placing bets on golf is a long-term grind. Trying to predict what one person is going to do for a single week, we can pretend and play like we know what's going to happen, and we get lucky by finding a few guys here and there. You've been fantastic at sniping the top-end guys specifically for unique tournaments, which is very impressive. But overall, the reason we like placement bets is because we feel like we have a reasonable edge over a decent period of time. So I'm expecting those kind of anomalies and outlier situations with this bad luck just to turn itself around, at some point, Spence. So I'm sure you're not worried. I know I'm not worried. The people out there shouldn't be worried either.
Yeah, and I mean, like at the end of the day, as much as I'm complaining about the market, I'm down 2 units on the year in it. Like it just really, it's prevented a really big season. And I guess I would say, I don't even think a year is a proper time, but I grade everything over the course of a year. Like yes. I'll do my yearly recap. So I guess for me, I'll say a year is a fair sample, but like, honestly, it's probably even more than that. Like 2, 3, 4 years is really where I want to be at. And you can really see, like, if you were to like take all your bets and you made a chart out of it and figured out where your trajectory is moving positive or negative with it, like you could get a really good indication after 2 years worth of bets of where it's going on with it. And even like, if you want to shorten it to a year, like we talked about, but this is a grind. It's a marathon. This is not as great as it is to hit a winner. And we say it all the time. It's nice to come on this show and be able to produce a winner for everybody out there so we can actually talk about it. But it's more than just one tournament. Like if we have one tournament that we can pull from out of the entire year, we've done something very wrong at the end of the day.
Right. Exactly. And just like I do it in my Breaking 100 article, I know you say don't ever really kind of pigeonhole yourself to a specific allotment of funds for the outright market, but just for the simplicity of my article, I always usually just assign $10 out of the 100, just to kind of provide a structure for some people. It's more of a basic kind of an outline, and I try to always just cash my placements and matchups and things to fund your outright market. Like that's basically, if you can do your outrights and still come out ahead after losing your outright bets that week, that's to me the definition of a successful golf bettor, because then you pop 10, 20 units when you hit your outright and you're safe, but trying to maintain that is difficult.
In reality, and I think that that's probably the number one takeaway from this, is I think people have too much exposure. And we keep talking about exposure in these markets, but I think people have too much exposure in the outright market, because you see so often that everything else doesn't matter if all the outright bets end up losing. And it's one thing when you hit an outright, because that can quickly make up for a bad week in other areas. But the inverse of that should never be true, to where you win every other thing and you get into the outright market and you lose those bets. And I think it just comes down to, it's like we've been preaching this answer for so long now. And I talk about it with Nick on Better Golf, and it's just something that is just very important out there. Like you cannot find yourself with betting the top of the board over and over again and adding up that exposure. So, I don't think you and I are ever going to combine to hit like 30 outright winners in a season for that. And 2 years ago was really my biggest takeaway of a year that I had, because I hit 10 outright winners that season. And that's not something that I would expect for like the limited amounts that I'm putting in, but it's all ROI. Like at the end of the day, it's what kind of ROI are you increasing your bankroll with?
Yeah, because I know this is what you're getting on the Rotoballer PGA show. We're chatting about outrights, but we're also chatting about how it affects your bankroll. I feel like everyone, if you're just betting outrights this year, you likely are in trouble. Like I feel like you've been running on the beautiful side of optimal. Like it's been a disaster of a year with Scotty Scheffler winning 4 times. That's incredible to think about. If you've only had 16 tournaments, Scotty Scheffler's won a quarter of them at borderline unbettable numbers prior to you hitting him. Like that was the crazy thing. I had it's crazy to think about. So let's just get into the Byron Nelson Invitational over here, the CJ Cup situation. We've got a whole bunch of new guys playing this tournament because we've got a bit of sponsors requirements from Sanjay M, etc. like that. So Spence, what, birdies, easy scoring, kind of long irons, make sure you can putt lights out. What unique kind of traits about this venue will you be adding to your model that isn't quite the same as elsewhere?
I wrote this in my Rotoballer article, and I do stand by this, Byron. Like, I think this is a really difficult tournament to try to extrapolate the data from, and I'll give it for 2 reasons here. Like, the first answer is it's only a 3-year sample size that we're actually looking at here. So anytime that you have limited information to pull from, you always run into some problems there. I think the second, I don't even want to call it an issue, but like thing that comes into play here is it's a pretty basic course. And I think when you have a basic course, at least at like the most fundamental level of it, you get 2 things that happen here. The first one is sports books. Look at the hold percentage. They want absolutely no action on this weekend. That is not what we want, because it just makes it more complicated to bet with it. But I also think on like the flip side of it, it's more challenging to actually find value when that's the answer of it, because everything is getting pushed down. So I kind of tried to run this thing in a very simplistic fashion with it. And I know that that's not necessarily the optimal route to take when we're trying to beat. I'm talking a lot about sports betting today. And like in reality, this is a DFS show probably more than anything. But even for DFS, when you start running into the same viewpoints as everybody else, you all get trapped into the same little box of everybody's getting the same model and the same players. And like, that's one of the reasons why when I started this, I tried to run things from a different sample size of everybody else. Like if somebody's going to tell me they're running it from the last 12 rounds, I want to go 24 rounds. If they're telling me they're going from 24 rounds, I want to go 50 rounds. I want to go 100 rounds. Like I don't want to be in that same area as everybody else. And you can always mix and match out. But when I look at this venue, I do think bent grass courses was something that I dove a little bit deeper into, add a little bit of putting into the mix there. Like this is really, for me, a long iron course plus distance plus bent grass putting.
Bang.
And then you can add everything else into the mix there that is going to be that comp course specific nature that you could find on a bunch of different websites out there. It's going to be that bent grass scoring, the TPC properties, your easy scoring conditions, venues that are a little bit longer. If you want to add in wind play, like there's a lot of things like that I added in for a smaller percentage of my model. But really at its core, if you're not hitting the ball off the tee, where you're a good total driver, I won't even say distance here because you have a wide open facility to where you are able to spray the ball. But I don't think distance is the only like prerequisite. There's a lot of different ways from that total driving that you can look into it. Like if you even just want to look at courses with no rough or courses that are easy to hit fairways, like I think that's another way to throw it in without just doing distance there. But if you're not adding that, the bent grass putting and the long iron play, you're doing something wrong here because like 35.6% of second shots come from outside of 200 yards, 12.7% increase over the average tour dispersion mark there.
Yeah, this is the thing. This is typically what you're going to be getting at TPC venues for the most part. You know, they tour preferred. You can play them. They publicly accessible for the most part. So they're not nuanced like Riv and places like that. So it is what it is. That's how we're going to roll. I did like that if you're doing 12 recent rounds, I want to do 24. You know, like just, you can run the same information, but just over a different time frame or just in a different way. What I've done with my irons is good shot numbers. I've ramped that the hell up. Like it's basically opportunities afforded, you know, basically the same thing. But I want to make sure that your long irons, I want you to be able to hit them close. I don't want like Will Zalatoris long irons where he's going to go middle of the fairway, which you'll see here shortly from him. So it's an interesting week, but very basic and simplistic at the same time. So I thoroughly enjoyed, Spencer, breaking down our two models. So we're going to do that again this week, going down from number 10 in our models and rank them, and then kind of get on from the rest of the slate from there and see how much we chat about. I'm sure we'll cover the majority of our outrights and bets by doing that because these are the guys at the top of our model, and it'll be fun to see how that goes. So starting off with model combat, number 10. You go ahead this time because I was rattling it off every single time last time and you had hardly anything to say after me. But go ahead, buddy.
So I think there's a lot of different ways that you can look at these players, and I'll try to do my best to talk about what's the best way to play them. Like I don't have ownership included into the mix right now for me, but you know, some of these players will be more suited for cash game builds. Some of them will be GPP targets. That's one of the things inside of my model when I look for upside and safety, and then you add the ownership to the mix on Tuesday and you're going to get a better idea there. I know this is a player you like, Byron, and this was an option that I faded a couple weeks ago. I took Russell Henley in a matchup against him. We kind of had this conversation off air where you told me to be harsher with your picks of some of these decisions there. I have Tom Kim 10th overall. He's 9th for upside, 16th for safety, but that's kind of the exact golfer that I'm looking for in these GPP contests or even on an outright ticket. I want that upside that comes into the mix for him. And he was a little bit boom or bust, even in the last, like, thing on the Masters, that 30th place finish. You get a Sunday run that propelled him there. You look at what he did at the RBC. That was really a short game production that he put together where it's kind of bait and switch that I don't think he was quite as good as what we actually got. But the funny remark to that is, and we talked about this, the best round that he played actually came on Sunday when I faded him and got lucky to probably beat him in that little go around there. But I really like him at TPC properties. We've seen what he's done at TPC Summerlin in the past. There's a handful of other venues that we can point towards. And you kind of said it best about TPC properties. These are very similar tracks for the most part, where I don't want to say one, like if you've seen one TPC property, you've seen them all, but they're TV friendly, birdie scoring, fan friendly. And when you get those answers, you're going to get a different distribution mix of what you're expecting. And Tom Kim has shown historically that you give him a course like that where you need to make birdies, the sky becomes the limit for him. So like if I'm looking just from a GPP answer, I think he's probably a little bit low for me at 10, but that safety mark is what hurts him a little bit. So we'll see on Tuesday. I'll add in some of the ownership to the mix and we'll get a better indicator of exactly how much I like him in GPPs. But I'm hoping that people are not going to go there as frequently just because of what we've gotten from him recently.
Yeah. We can chat about this as we go along, but like he's in this range where there's so many good affordable options that are a lot safer than he is. I think people will be going to. I'm projecting him as one of the lowest owned guys in this, maybe outside of Sungjae potentially. I think he'll be one of the lowest owned guys, even with Jason Day in this range. Oh, he's not even in the range. Sorry. I've got it filtered by my rank. So I'm like messing up all these numbers here. But I think he's a great pivot, and he provides you with that boom bust potential. Like when he gets himself in the mix, he can party, but he hasn't done it lately. I've got him ranked 12th, Spencer, in my upside ranking, which I'll be using for this particular exercise because I'm looking for upside. Like let's a DFS show. We're mainly looking for GPPs. And I've actually got him graded better for his safety. Like his long-term ball striking really grades out nicely. He's got a few really poor, he hasn't really fired to his potential lately. So I would have had him inside the top 10 if it was safety, but I don't. I have Will Zalatoris coming in at 10th. I've tried to fiddle with a few numbers here and there, but it's not the golf course for him. This isn't a Will Zalatoris track. Like we need Torrey Pines, we need Bay Hill, we need Riviera. We don't need TPC Craig Ranch. Like Willie Z's not going to be rolling in putts, and his birdie rate's actually rather lackluster for a venue like this. One of the best bogey avoiders in the field. That's not going to help you diddly this week. Like you got to make sure you are making birdies. Willie Z. It's going to be interesting to see where these top guys in the 10K range comes in, Spence, because these are very unpalatable names in the top 10s there. So
have you seen where I have Will Zalatoris in my model?
I have not. Hit me, baby. It's probably 22nd or something.
So I have him 26th overall, 49th for upside. The safety number goes to 19th. The ball striking return from Zalatoris, there's a lot to like about that. And maybe I'm a little bit too low on him, but I had red flags that entered the mix, and it goes beyond the putter. He's 145th in expected putting at this course. You talked about the lack of birdie making potential that he brings, but I guess for me, the biggest concern that I found here, it was the par 4 scoring. That was a number that was outside of the top 50. And I worry a little bit. And I want to preface it with this. And I think you would double down on this. He is the third price player on the board for DraftKings?
Yes.
You have him 10th. So, I mean, technically based off like just nothing else, he's a negative value off of that. We could talk about ownership. We could add that to the mix. You're higher on him than I am. And when I have him inside, the back end of the top 25 there, I'm not going to get to him. Like I think Spieth and Day and options like that make more sense with it, but I don't think either one of us are necessarily super bullish on Zalatoris. Maybe more so you than me. You can correct me if I'm wrong with that sentiment there, but I guess the thing I'm just trying to point out more than anything is you are lower than at least consensus would be of the price.
Correct. And if you take a look at what he's done, Spencer, 4th at API, 9th at the Masters, top 5 finish at Riv, those are all courses that suit his skill set. This is not it, like everywhere else out of that, he hasn't been featuring at all. So we'll see what the ownership comes in. I was even tempted to bet him top 20, but that number doesn't even seem tempting enough either in this kind of a field. So we'll leave him alone. Who do you have ranked number 9 in your model, Spencer?
This one is the wild one. And I decided not to change this, and I left it because if I date this back to last year, this was a player that very consistently cracked the top end of my model week after week. So I don't think I think a lot of people are going to look at this and he's going to look good on models because of what he's provided in the couple events that he's played in this season. But even if I backtrack this to 2023, my model really liked him. So I decided to keep it where it was. I did have data from 2023 to pull into the mix here. So this wasn't just necessarily a 2-tournament sample size, but Byron, there are so many similarities that my model had here when I had Corey Connors when he won the Valero in 2019 or 2020. It's not a 250-1 golfer this time, and the market's kind of respecting him. But Peter Quest, 7,500, 9th overall in my model, 2nd for upside. Now, that might be the ridiculous answer that comes into the mix there because that is taking kind of a flawed return there. But there was so much that my math liked about him, and I was willing to trust it a little bit more than normal just because of, like, I talk about this a lot. You don't really see that many massive disparities inside of my top 10. For the most part, when we have this conversation, it's going to be 10 of the 15, 20 favorites. Like, I think my model's pretty in tune with the market in a lot of these spots. So when I get an answer like this, and even if you look at this board, every single person is essentially 40-1 or less inside the top 10 for me. And then you have little old Peter Quest that is just popping out like a sore thumb here. So I'm going to be bullish on him. I'm going to be aggressive on him. I bet him to win 12 units in the outright market. I'm going to try to find some placement bets on him and kind of try to shoot that into the top 10 range. But I don't know if I necessarily expect you to have a similar viewpoint as me, because this is a very polarizing figure here. But this to me is going to be the spot where I'm trying to get aggressive.
Yeah, I've got him ranked 18th for safety. Then upside is 47th. That's what I do for my upside, is using the 75th percentiles of this year. Like, I'm trying to just grab the best rounds of guys from this current season and see what happens. So he's obviously not really quite spit out those kind of results just yet. But Spencer, he's an incredible long iron player. He's got tons of length. So he's obviously hitting 8 irons from 190 whenever, like old Peter Monardi, the other Peter, Skinny Pete, is hitting 5 irons from 190. So that changes things up a little bit. It really does help. I like him a lot this week. Obviously not nearly as much as yours, but still inside the top 20 for safeties. It doesn't mean, it shows that your model's not like, we both have differing opinions, but it kind of ties out, like it's close. So I'll take it. Mine, boring, Steven Yeager, number 9. He jumps to 9th. He was actually 3rd for safety. I love Steven Yeager for safety. I think it's that upside, that high upside return that's kind of missing from him there. Doesn't quite have those electric rounds, but I like him at this kind of venue, Spence. His driver kind of goes a million miles, but he keeps it relatively straight. That's the nice thing about Yeager. And I think I want to kind of invest in him this week at $9,200. Part of the other 9 guys in the 9K range that I definitely want to dip in my toes into this week. So we'll chat about this 9K range. It's going to be very important to deal with, but I got Yeager as 9th for upside this week.
I'll save my thoughts on Yeager, because I do have a takeaway that we'll get to later in this show, but stay tuned for that. But I guess the general answer to that would be I like Yeager this week.
Okay, good. So he's coming up then. I like to hear that. We'll do a little bit of a snake draft situation, Spence. I'll double down again on the turn here and say that I've got Keith Mitchell as my 8th ranked golfer. Similar situation with Yeager. Just this beautiful driver of the golf ball. Only weighted driving about 15% of my model, but got a lot of birdie making, got a lot of easy course scoring, and just the general weighted approach numbers there too. So Keith Mitchell grades out fantastically from all those elements. 8th in the model, nothing too concerning there. He's 13th in DFS rank, so a slight kind of value play in that department, but I don't mind him for the 8th ranked golfer in the model.
Where do you have him for safety? Where do you have him for upside?
14th for safety, 8th for upside, which is kind of funny to speak about, because I wouldn't say that he should be that way. It should be the opposite, but such is the numbers. Maybe I'm not labeling my headers correctly or something, but I've told you what goes into the metrics, and that's what's spitting out. So
I will jump into this one. I guess when we get here, we can skip my pick. I have Keith Mitchell 4th overall.
Okay.
I had him 8th for upside and 5th for safety, and I don't think that safety number is technically right, just with how volatile he is.
Yeah.
Either. So I don't know. That's going to take, to me, that's a lot of the recent form stuff. That's a lot of the course history that comes into that safety number. The upside is a little bit more from a data-driven perspective of like a statistical extrapolation, I guess would be the best word that I do from it. So I like Keith. I bet him outright this week. I don't know if I love it, just because I feel like I'm getting the wrong end of the number here, where I wish this would have been 50-1 in reality. But when I initially ran this, there were essentially 6 or 7 golfers that had value in my model in the range I was looking for. He was one of the names. He got pushed down a little bit when I added in a couple things to the mix, but a top 5 golfer in my model, like, I'm never going to necessarily be upset about that.
No. You see, that's just the thing for me, is he's one of 3 guys inside my top 10 that doesn't have more than a 5% rate for top 5s. So how can I tell you that the upside is 8th when he's really not finishing inside the top 5? Statistically, that's what the model is trying to tell us. It's projecting, but historical stats and metrics will say otherwise from the upside perspective. But
let me add one thing to that really fast, Byron, and we'll move on to the next player. But I think this is an interesting thing that you brought up, and I kind of even saw it in my model for this tournament, which is, I guess, why I don't want to say that I got less happy about the bet, but like there was something that pushed me to where, like, when I saw this, there were some concerns about it when we're talking about actually winning. One of the things that I add after I do everything and I run my model is I try to figure out exactly where the high-end marks are for every single player. So whether I'm running, and my categories are very broad. Like it's never just like a surface level answer that you're getting here. Like it's going to be like, I'll give you an example here. Like my weighted scoring incorporates 30 different things essentially that comes into the mix with it. Yeah. So it's not just what you're getting one answer of weighted scoring, but it's incorporating a bunch of different things into the mix. So I had 6 main categories that I ran this week. Of those 6 categories, Keith Mitchell did not rank in the top 10 of any of those 6 categories. I worry a little bit like that. He had negative trajectory in my model for upside. We're still paying a price that is a little bit shorter than we would ideally want for a golfer that is, I think he's boom or bust. Like I know my model doesn't, but I have seen it firsthand to where he leads the field in ball striking and he still finds a way to miss the cut because the putter in the short game goes south. So I like him. I'm not cashing out the ticket. If I win, I will come on next week and I will celebrate it just like I celebrated the Rory ticket this week. But it's not a perfect profile.
Yeah, it's okay. You know what? That's the thing, Spence. Sometimes things change up as you go along. So nice to see Sia in the chat. We don't see any Joanne after she said us not to bet Rory last week, but we always welcome you back, Joanne. You know, I'm a big believer in second chances. So, Spence, did you tell me who's your 8th guy?
My 8th guy is Adam Schenk. So Adam Schenk couldn't quite reach what like the upper tier of my model was. He lacked this Texas pedigree inside my sheet, and that's another thing that I included into it. I normally don't look at like specific states and stuff, but I don't know. I thought it was an interesting thing to turn into. Like I think Florida, Texas, California, they all have their own separate nuances that come into play. That's going to put some of the win factors that I was trying to add in. And I did it more in that way than actually putting it inside of my model as its own separate category. But there was a lot that my data liked about him. He was inside of the top 10 for weighted long iron production, expected driving, bent grass putting. When you added all those things together, and that's one of the things that I added a 15% weight for, he graded behind 2 players. We could make the argument that one of them, Peter Quest, being maybe the statistical anomaly here, and that might need to be regressed. The other one is the winner from the tournament last year in Jason Day. So I do think that that 3-tiered nature of trying to find each one of those specific things, that's something that Schenk brings to the mix. And I bet him at 50-1. That number's been on the move a little bit. I'm still fine with it at 40-1. I thought at the price he was on DraftKings, there was a lot of upside to consider there with him.
Dude, I've loved this guy for a long time. I was betting him when round about last year this time. He was playing great golf. Charles Schwab Challenge, the Memorial, just rattling off good finishes at a multitude of destinations too. So when he's playing his best golf, he's pretty darn good. And I think, Spence, maybe I should change mine from upside to short-term and safety to long-term. Maybe that's a better way of looking at what I'm trying to describe here. But when I look at his long-term numbers, he's 19th for me. When I look at his short-term numbers, it's 39th for this season. He just hasn't had that upside that we've seen from him in the past. He's a baller, dude. He just hasn't got that win. He was one of the few guys that just kept finding himself in the mix and just couldn't take care of business. So definitely don't mind him whatsoever, Spencer.
Can I ask you a question about Schenk? Because I think you brought up an interesting point there. Players like him, and there's a lot. It's not just him. Like we talked about it with JT Poston. How much do you think them playing schedules that they're not normally used to having to take on has hurt them in some of these factors? Because like I talked about this with Poston a handful of weeks ago. I can't even remember what event it was right now. I'll figure out the answer to that and get back to it. But like there are certain events to where the data will start looking very south for them. And then maybe even when they produce at a level that is okay, it's still not necessarily where you would want it to be. And then all of a sudden the form is actually better than you would anticipate it being when they get a track that fits them. Like, is that anything that you added to your model? Is that something that you've looked into or tried to run numbers for?
Uniquely building him for this week, essentially.
Not necessarily not even that like necessarily uniquely building him, but like almost cutting him some slack, and not just him, any player, some slack in some of these positions to where you look at your model, you see that there's a lack. And I don't even mean like going in and changing any of the data with it, like leaving it where it is, but kind of having an understanding, I guess, that this is a player that we have lacked upside, but look at the courses he's played. He was not ideally suited for this venue.
Yeah.
This venue, I thought he was outside of the top 50 players in. Like,
Yeah.
Is that something that you have done at all?
Yeah, well, like when Willie Z was going rogue with my numbers for me, because of his injury, there's some stuff that needs to be manually adjusted. I've got my Maniac override column that I dive into there every now and then. And that's the reason why I haven't released my model just yet, because I've been still fiddling on that with all this DFS stuff coming out late. It's got me all whacked out of sync. But yes, the reason that Maniac override is there is like numbers can prove one thing. But like for me, for instance, Spencer, like a Xander situation, like he's going to potentially grade out number one in the model all the time, but you're going to have guys who have won way more often than he has. You know, for instance, like a Siwoo Kim. I think this is a great situation where it's like I would do the opposite here. For instance, like I'm just going to jump all the way to this because he's my sixth guy, but Siwoo is my sixth guy in my model. So do I think he's going to finish sixth? Maybe. I don't think he's going to finish fifth because he's one of those other guys that's south of the top 5% rate that I mentioned with Keith. Siwoo Kim under 20-1 to win this tournament, and we've hardly seen him flirt with the top of the leaderboard ever. You know, like they're glomming onto this T2 from last year where he charged up the leaderboard, and I think the upside is not available there. You know, like T40 markets, T30 markets for Siwoo, T20 potentially, yes. But we've only had 3 top 10s in the last 12 months. And by the time this week is done, if he doesn't top 10 again, that falls away because his third top 10 was this year, you know, like this event last year. So if that answers your question, I would go the opposite way with Siwoo. I don't think he's the 6th ranked golfer in my model. I'd probably potentially put him at like 12, despite coming in
11th.
Yeah, exactly. You know, like he's got the 6th best total strokes gained, but what's that attributed to? You know, there's been zero upside involved with this stuff, you know? So yeah, weird stuff there. So do you want to do 6 and then we'll go back to 7, or do you want to go do 7 and 6 at the same time, Spence?
So the way that my model has this is not necessarily the way that I would put it out, because I'll give you the numbers and we'll have a discussion about this, because I think one is probably better as a cash game play, where the other one I would be more inclined to want to play in GPP contests if I was going to. I know there's going to be some negative, I guess maybe not even leverage being the right word. We'll see where the ownership ends up landing with it. But Jason Day was 7th overall, 6th for upside, 13th for safety. Alex Noren was 6th, 26th for upside, 2nd for safety. You know, if I combine both of those factors together, Noren would see a decrease in my model based off of that answer. I do think what we've gotten from him recently is a very safe floor into the mix. And I think for cash games, he makes a lot of sense for that reason. And it's a kind of what we talked about even with Zalatoris for you with Jason Day with me. He's the 2nd price golfer. I have him 7th overall. I think he's a fine play. I don't have a problem with him. The numbers like him. I'm not going to talk anybody out of playing him. I think at the right ownership, he will make a lot of sense. Don't love that he's the defending champion, because I think people will probably play him a little bit more than they would have in a lot of these spots. Although I'm not coming on shows anymore for the most part talking about him. So this Jason Day love is, you know, let's see what happens when this money comes at the end with this pit money with it, because I think I earned Jason Day millions of dollars, and now I'm giving the money to Wyndham Clark. So that's an unfortunate thing for Day not listening to me all these years to jump onto my podcast. I've talked to Malbon trying to get sponsorship from them. They won't get back. I mean, I'll wear the stupid sweaters on this show and the MC Hammer pants. Like nobody will have to see them.
No, you won't. But you have to do like gold member with your legs in the air so you can advertise the bell bottoms there for Jason Day's pants. But to answer your question, Spence, I got Noren ranked 12th for safety, which is perfect because that's literally his like upside ranking for me. You know, he doesn't finish better than 9th. So he falls back to 19th for upside or recency. And then Jason Day 7th for recent form or recent ranking, and, you know, 6th for safety. I think he's got a bit of a more, you know, beautiful looking long-term metric than short-term in my
It's a nice spot for Day. Like, I don't just say that because he's the defending champion of this tournament. I think any time that you can get a reduction in proximity, any sort of proximity from any range, it's always a benefit for him. He's able to use his driver. We know he's a great putter.
Yes.
Those are benefits here. And if you're missing a bunch of greens in regulation to begin with, like you're going to have problems to actually win this tournament. And this is a DFS show. We are shooting for upside. That's why I just want to preface that I do really like Alex Noren this week, but there's different markets to play him than maybe what we're talking here.
Yeah, he's profitable in the top 20 market last 12 months. That's beautiful. Like there's not a lot of guys that are profitable in the top 20 market in this field because of who they've been playing with. And I've got a Jake Knapp here, Spence. I know it's completely off the topic of number 6 in the models here, but I've got Jake Knapp, who I can't even remember what I was going to tell you about him right now. I was trying to say like upside Jake Knapp. Oh, it's playing different tournaments. Jake Knapp was playing quite nicely, going along, wins the Mexico, plays the Cognizant, just a whole bunch of jabronis playing along, then plays the API, plays the Masters, plays, just all these big tournaments with the likes of Scotty Scheffler's and such in them. This week we get him again now in a normal Corn Ferry Tour type environment. Not necessarily as bad, but you know what I'm saying? Like what he was used to playing earlier in the year before. These guys win these tournaments like Nick Dunlap. Now he's playing all these big boy events and sucking it up. Like he needs to be playing the bad tournaments to really get his footing on the PGA Tour. So it's really, like you mentioned, what these tournaments are is a big deal of what these guys' results have been, because a lot of them are chasing the big bucks and the designateds when, in fact, the best success is to be had in weeks like this for them potentially.
Yep.
Number 6 for me, Siwoo Kim, just told you all about him. Love the safety, love him in cash. He's going to be like 50% owned in cash potentially. People love good course history, and at this golf course, it doesn't matter. So I don't know what everyone's glomming onto. Potentially, they play well in Texas, but even that, he hasn't played great yet. So what's your take on Siwoo, Spence?
I mean, he's 11th overall for me. I think the recent form that we're looking at is very encouraging. I guess my only concern with it, and I'd like to see where the ownership ends up landing here, it's an expensive price tag for him.
Ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's too much. He should be like, I can tell you what the proper number is for me if you give me 1 second.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, 18-1 in most books that's ludicrous.
Yeah.
That's bananas bad.
Yeah, so for DraftKings, I have him proper at 9,000, so there's an $800 difference there, which it adds up. Like if you're at the very top of the board, at the right ownership percentage, we can have a different discussion of why he's still a value and worth taking a shot on. But I like him. Don't like the price tag.
Yep.
Pretty much hate the outright number, but I would give a very similar answer to that for this is what happens when you get an outright board with a hold percentage of 160+%. Like you just have so many players that were priced out and you get a lot of these very fringe values that I like this week, but they're very close, like one way or another, like the Keith Mitchell
Coin
bet
flips.
that I did. I'm going to move forward into my next bet that I actually have because he's the 5th player on my model. But kind of a very similar answer to Keith Mitchell here, where there's a negative movement for upside, which is what I never want to see when I'm actually punching a ticket in the outright market. I don't think it's quite as pronounced as what we got with Keith Mitchell, but I took Tom Hoagie when he opened early in the week at I got him at 35-1 actually. I guess you could have gotten 40-1 when it was out there at a given point there, but you think of the long iron proximity that he's able to bring into the mix. He's the number 1 weighted proximity player. That's kind of what I'm holding on to, hoping that we can get the upside there. Weighted scoring numbers leave a little bit to be desired. There's a couple other metrics that are kind of going to be hit and miss with them, like par 3 scoring, great, but there's not necessarily been this corollary indicator of par 3 success here. Like that's one of the really interesting things when you dive into the numbers. Par 3 scoring was about the least important of actually finding high-end success of almost any single venue that I looked into. And I think the reason behind that is you just have these long, for the most part, 3 of the 4 are going to be over 200 yards and you're just kind of trying to make par. So you're not separating yourself in those positions. So really where the difference makers come into play end up being on the par 4s and on the par 5s, and 21st in my model for par 4 scoring, 58th in my model for weighted par 5 scoring. If he scores as the 58th golfer in par 5 scoring, he's not going to win this tournament. And, some of those things on the back end of the equation is what worried me about a couple of these bets. But like I said, I'm always still trying to build out a number here. And at the very basic level of the return that I got, they were a value where they were. It's just some of these back end numbers that I've put into the mix. To me, Keith Mitchell, Hoagie, we could name a couple other players. These are the prototypical I don't even want to say overvalued, over-owned players on DraftKings. These are the guys that come in every single week at 25%, and they have this cap ceiling, and yet everybody plays them, and they come in 22nd place, and nobody really thinks anything of it, and that's fine when they're a certain price. I mean, I'm going to say it's fine. I still don't think it's fine, but it makes it worse now when we're talking about Hoagie's 9,100, Keith Mitchell is 8,800. I'd like to see where the ownership actually lands in those spots. But if those are like two of the big chalks of the week, I think you're going to have to pick and choose either one or the other in that situation there.
Facts, dude. And guess what? Tom Hoagie, Spencer, I mentioned there were two more guys that hadn't got above 5% in top 5 rate. 0 top 5s last 12 months.
Yeah.
But 7 top 10s in the last 10 starts. Plus 162 for a top 20 bet. Sorry, did I say top 20s? 7 top 20s in his last 10 starts, plus 162 for a top 20. That's my exposure to Tom Hoagie this week. That's at Bet365. I love Tom Hoagie, Spence. I've got him graded 4th in upside or recent form, recent ranking here for me. It's just it's like he was right in the mix, boom. Like RBC, I think he was right in the mix there, dude. Just doing weird stuff, but made a quad and still got the top 20 bet across the line. So I'll take that on the final hole. That would have been, like you were mentioning, I probably wouldn't have bet him this week if he finished 321. I don't think I would have lived myself. So 4th in my model. 5th for me is Sanjay. Can't get away from this dude right now. Not playing the greatest, but playing like sporadically well, like randomly. And I think no course history. That's typically what a lot of people kind of glom onto for Sanjay. He's got his courses. This is one of them. TPC Summerlin, Sedgefield, boom. TPC, whatever the hell we're playing this week, Craig Ranch. I think those are courses for Sanjay M, because if you spray it like exorbitantly wide, you're going to have some issues. There's some problems out here. You can have to reload if need be, but that's way offline. Sanjay is always going to be in the fairway. He's safe. He's all that jazz. I just, it seems like a great long iron player. It seems like that's what's been sticking around since his lapse in iron play recently. So now we get a course that just suits what he's comfortable with. And I think he's flying all the way back from Korea, playing in a tournament out there. So guys probably landing now as we speak and going to go tee it up at this venue. But we've seen a lot of Koreans, and I know it sounds really racist, but it's Zoysia, right? Because they've got it out there, and the fairways are Zoysia, yeah? I think I love that word, by the way, Zoysia. And Sanjay, long irons, let's go, dude. So and par 5 scoring, that's his jam, like top in the field here. So lots to like there, Spence. Where do you even have Sanjay in your top 10?
I'll give you an interesting answer here. So he's 14th overall, but he's 5th for upside. That is, to me, that's the outright bets. Those are the GPP targets in large field contests where and Sanjay lands under this quite a bit. I guess the only thing I worry about based off of your answer is the last time Sanjay made that route and entered back into the States, I don't think he's been fixed since that moment. No. So I don't know if he needed to go back and now he's recalibrated himself and he needed, it's a full circle moment that's taken place. But if that keeps people off of him for that narrative, and the iron play, as you said, has been just horrendous.
Yeah.
But the long iron play is still inside the top 35 on my model. That's really the one thing that's holding him together. And when I look at weighted proximity, he is still inside the top 40 for a lot of those reasons. He's essentially good from short and long. Everything
in
between
two complete opposites. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Which is cool. That's where a lot of the scoring happens on the par 5s in both aspects, and that's why he's such a good par 5 scorer. Isn't it funny when stats make sense, and they kind of correlate to other departments there? Spencer, number 4 in your model, who is it and why?
So it was Keith Mitchell. I talked about him a little bit. I will move into the number 3 player, which you talked about previously. I think you said you had him 9th. I have Steven Yeager 3rd. Here is the wild answer that I was saving till the end here. When I ran this from just a pure upside perspective, this removes, and I know we have been differing on this opinion for the longest time here, and we now have a victory from him. So I feel like I can at least say this and it doesn't come off as wild because we know he can actually win. He has a bunch of Korn Ferry wins if you want to dive it deeper into it, but the number 1 player in my model from a pure upside perspective this week, we just saw him win in Texas. I think the ball striking skill set that he brings to the mix here is exactly what you want to see. And then I'm always looking for these, I don't even want to say it's some like large increase, but I'm always looking for increases with the putter. He got about a 30 spot increase from his baseline to here. It doesn't necessarily push it as high as when he won at the Houston Open, because that one was the outlandish move that we got from it. But even still, like if he is a borderline top 50 putter in this tournament, and the one thing I have noticed about Jaeger recently is when he pops with the putter, he really can pop in a big way. And when he misses, he really can miss in a big way. So if he even has a positive trajectory in that area, I'm very intrigued. And I bet him at 33-1. And I know the argument would be, is Steven Jaeger really going to win 2 tournaments in a very short time period? And I understand the argument there. Look, there's one person on the PGA Tour that has beaten Scottie Scheffler since March. Here's your man right here. That's the only person that we have to talk about.
Yes. That's it. And he's 30 something. What do you say? 33-1. Yeah. That's a fair number on a PGA Tour winner in the state of Texas. I feel like you said, the only person to have beat Scottie Scheffler in Scheffler's last 5 appearances. So that is something to hang your hat on. And he's a great course fit, in my opinion. And I think, like you said, that putter, it comes and goes. Whether it shows up, we don't know. But when it does, it's beautiful. Number 2, Spence, who have you got rocking and rolling for us?
So it depends on which way we want to go here. Like if we want to go this, because these 2 guys are like essentially tied in my model.
Okay.
If we want to go the safety route, it would be Adam Scott. If we want to go the upside route, and I guess I'll give you my number 1 player or my number 2, however which way you want to roll this out, it would be Jordan Spieth.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So let's compare them, because I feel like that's an easy way to go about it. There's 2 very unique markets to play them in, most likely.
Yeah. For Scott, for me, there's a lot that I can look towards, whether it's the course history of the 2 top 32s that he's put together. He came 8th last year. We can point towards the back-to-back top 22 finishes that he's had at the Masters and the Valero. There's also the statistical return for Adam Scott, where I run into these spots with him quite frequently where my model likes him more than mostly when I add in quite a bit of putting into the mix, because he is a golfer for me from a weighted strokes gain total outlook that is the number 1 player in this field. Like Steven Jaeger is number 1 when I take the weighted scoring and put all the holes together. Adam Scott's number 1 when you actually add all 4 facets of the game into one. Take what I believe the dispersion should be between those 4 metrics, being off the tee approach, around the green, and putting, rolling into one category. I hate the outright number when we're talking here with Adam Scott. Like I understand he's number 1 in my model. I don't want to bet him at 20-1. That doesn't mean, though, that I can't find him in matchups. It doesn't mean that I can't play him in placements. It doesn't mean that if I'm building a cash game lineup that I am not rolling out Adam Scott as one of the core members of my build there. I think on the opposite end of the spectrum there, you have Jordan Spieth that I don't even think Jordan Spieth knows what he's doing from shot to shot. Volatile doesn't explain Jordan Spieth and his actions. He's as likely to hit the ball off the dome of somebody with a drive and put it back in the fairway as he is to, this dude, and I'm not even saying this as a joke, like he almost fell off the cliff at Pebble Beach a handful of years ago. He hit it onto a roof a couple of events ago. Intentionally hit it onto a roof. This is a golfer that is just high ceiling, low floor. You're in Texas, you want to have a duel out there and you want to have a shootout. Like this is a guy in Texas that can have one of those shootouts. I think for DraftKings, he's a very intriguing play. I think he's the most expensive player. You don't see the best form with him. I kind of think, and we'll see what ends up happening here, I don't think people are going to necessarily own him as frequently as I think they would in most of these spots, just because high price tag in this situation to where you can play the defending champion. You can move down into the 9,000s and there's a slew of options you have. Like there's $9,000 players that people might rather turn to and go Mitchell and Hoagie or something, even in that range. Like to me, I'm going to be aggressive with Spieth. I think anytime you put him in Texas, it's just a different narrative that you get. So I'll say Spieth is my number 1 here. If you want to flip what the overall rank, it would actually be Adam Scott, but that's just because of the floor that I have for Scott.
Cool. I had Spieth number 3. I totally skipped out on him, but like you said, it's like Minecraft. Is it Minecraft where you build stuff and then if you built the roof first and then like fell off your platform,
Yeah.
That's Jordan Spieth's flaw. It's like you're falling into this black hole, and just the only thing you see is the ceiling, and you just keep falling and falling. There's no floor. It's literally a cliff, like you mentioned, Spence. So somehow he's third. He loves Texas golf, and I want to ride the Jordan Spieth roller coaster when there's not a lot of people on there for me to throw up on. I want it just to be on me and you. So, and Sia and the rest of our gang in the comments here, which is kind of slowed down a little bit, So we expect a bit more comments coming in because we've got some favorite plays of yours that you want us to chat about. Bring that in. So, Spence, no Benny on for you in the top 10, huh?
So Ben on for me is 12th.
Okay. I'll go ahead and give you my case for top 2 in my model. I don't have my number 1 out there yet, but Benny On's just grading out fantastically, Spence. We've often discussed, once again, how I try and avoid the mistake of taking someone's inaccuracy off the tee where they kind of purposely missing fairways. I think this kind of wraps back to your Adam Schenk question about how to manipulate data to provide someone upside in a model versus, like if you're taking a look at Benny On's accuracy, it's like one of the worst in the field. But if you take a look at what he gets up to strokes gain on these courses, off like 7,200 to 7,400 yards, he's 11th in the field for me, so that's where you can see if you plugged in 10% accuracy for Benny On, he's not going to be second in the model, but you plug in this kind of metric, he's going to show up. Also an incredibly good long iron player, surprise, surprise. When you have to dial it in every now and then, he can hit a 3-iron 280 yards. We've seen it happen in Hawaii. So I love everything about Benny On. The putter has been so. I don't necessarily know, Spence, what is his situation on the bent grass greens?
He's for weighted putting for me. If I looked at just bent grass and I took similar courses, he's 147th, he's 135th for weighted putting. That is the only answer that I do not like about him. And I think if there's going to be an answer that's going to be something, if you could let me handpick this, it would be the putter, because I think the ball striking can really carry him in a lot of spaces, and not just him, any golfer in that matter. You kind of said it best, Byron, just talking about some of the driving totals. Like I get that across the board with my model. 5th for distance, 104th for accuracy. Accuracy is not the answer here. If you look at this off the tee with this short, easy rough, inside the top 35, top 10 projected total driver for me, while also being a top 20 weighted proximity player. So obviously it was a little bit lower in my model than I would expect him to be, but this is a nice spot for Ben On. Like he could win this tournament. This is not a golfer I'm trying to fade. This is a real name that you can consider for DFS in matchup markets. To me, he's very similar to Steven Jaeger. Like I think that they both have an upside to them that I maybe more so I would say than you would in this, to where I wouldn't be shocked if either one of those two golfers won. But obviously I had Steven Jaeger in the top 3 of my models. So if I'm comparing him to Jaeger, and as everybody knows who listens to these shows quite frequently, I'm very high on Jaeger historically. So that's a compliment if you're being included into the Steven Jaeger mix. So
beautiful.
I like the Ben On play, but I'll let you give us your number 1.
Sure. And I'm gonna just tidy up some Ben On stuff here as I'm getting into the number 1, because we haven't necessarily had that many bent grass surfaces in the rotation since Benny On has gone to the broomstick. Now I'm running it for the last 36 rounds. Maybe he's got 12, or I probably should have known this if I'm going to give it as an argument. But, maybe half of his rounds more recently are still not enough to bring his putting numbers all the way back to, where they should be. I don't think he's 155th. I would probably put him somewhere just inside the top 100, maybe, based off his bend splits. Just what we know moving to the broomstick. What I do know is Adam Scott is my number 1 ranked golfer in the model for both departments. Number 1, no questions asked, dude. So I'm not even going to bet him to win the tournament, though. I'm going to bet him for a top 20. Or a top 10.
I think that's the right way to play him. But isn't that wild that we both came up with Adam Scott number 1 from an overall answer there? Like that's we have some similarities. We have some differences in these spots, but Adam Scott is not the name that you would expect to pop number 1. And somehow with that answer, neither one of us actually bet him to win, just because, and it comes down to the price. If he's 40 to 1, I'll take a chance on it. At 18, 20 to 1, bet him as a top 20. And there's a lot of names like that, like Adam Scott. You could argue maybe Keith Mitchell, Tom Hoagie, Alex Noren. These are all the names, and I unfortunately bet 2 of them to win this tournament, or maybe fortunately when we get here on Sunday afternoon. But those are the prototypical, let's find a way to bet them in a matchup because we like them. Let's bet them as a top 20 bet. You've done a really good job about talking about the lack of ceiling on a lot of these options, but Scott is not respected ever for how great he still is at his age right now.
Yes, dude. He's like a much better version of Phil Mickelson. I'd imagine they're very similar age-wise. Like if you look at Adam Scott, he's done 0 drugs in his life. Phil Mickelson looks like he's just been through rehab 5 times in the last 2 years. It's a tough scene, and he's playing good golf. But these guys that get older, Spencer, their competitive edge, to me, that killer mentality seems to disappear. Like to win a tournament. Sure. I don't trust Adam Scott in his 40s. Maybe Adam Scott, my age, 32, like in his goddamn prime, would have been obviously winning the Masters and stuff. So it's been a hot minute, but what he does is he finishes inside the top 20, 53% of his starts every other time and some change. And they're going to give us plus 130 for tires paid in full at Bet365. Top 20 bet. Like Tom Hoagie, Adam Scott, would love to get to them in the outright market, but their top 20 placement bets is a completely fine alternative for me. So I'm all in that market for Adam. Let's see what they can get up to.
Yeah, number 1 for safety for Scott, number 2 for safety with Hoagie. Like that's what we're looking for on placement bets there. So it makes a lot of sense.
And as we transition out of Model Combat, which took a hot minute, we're going to figure out our stuff. We're still learning some fun things. If you guys really enjoyed the Model Combat portion of the show, I saw someone mentioning here really good analysis from Phil. We appreciate that. There's so many shows out there. We're just trying to provide you with some different stuff. Whether it works or not, who the heck knows? The show's still in its infancy. Me and Spence are really good at having these long-winded, analytically minded, detail-oriented kind of conversations that really we hope can bring new information to people, like kind of change your way about thinking about betting. So we appreciate you guys for hanging around. What I want to chat to you about, Spence, on Bet365, they've got this extra each-way market. I dropped it in our Discord for people to kind of nibble on, and not really too many people gave me their thoughts about it because it's a weird one. They've got all these different odds, and just for Benny On, because I bet him to win this tournament at 45 to 1 right now. The best numbers you can find on Benny On are like 28s or 30s, but if they ramp you up to 45 to 1, but you have to buy the each-way placement, and it's only the top 3. So if you're splitting 45 to 1 by 5, what's that? It's 9. So you're getting 9 to 1 for a top 3. He's plus 550 for a top 5. So I'm kind of curious as to your take on this because I'm going to be attacking this. Spencer, how many times have I finished second this year? Like this top 3 column on Bet365 was made for me. Give me these crazy odds and give me this high upside that I'm just missing out on every single time. I feel like 45 to 1 compared to 30, it's almost like giving you half off on your top 5 insurance in a way, so I'm curious as to your take on this situation.
I'd honestly have to run numbers for it. My general thought in these situations is when a sports book offers something that looks good on the surface, it's probably not.
Okay. I'd love to know.
I don't have a statistical answer like off the top of my head. I'd have to dive into it. My thought would be, though, having to buy into the each way part of it would very quickly add up when you only have 3 spots.
Correct. But also at the same time, like Benny On is 45 to 1, Tom Kim 60 to 1.
Those are great. Those are great numbers.
Those are crazy numbers, dude. So 60 to 1, that's 20 to 1 for a Tom Kim. Sorry, 12 to 1 for a Tom Kim top 3. It's weird. You're going to get in on that, but what's Tom Kim, 30 out there? 35s? Yeah. You basically getting that and a top 3 insurance for the most part. So it's a really interesting market. I would love for your feedback. You've got some homework to do before next week.
What has Ben On at? Did you say? Like if it wasn't 45, like what is he out there in other places?
So at the exact same book, he's 30 to 1, but that's just for the each ways. Let me see. I think he's like in the like 30 or 28. Let's double check. Benny On grades out as, there we go. Where are you, buddy? 30. 30s and 28s for the most part. So it's, you're getting 15 extra points, dude. It's like a lot. It's half off.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like if you took half and half on it, I mean, yeah, you're essentially. I guess my guess would still be it's a little bit off, but it's probably not as off as I thought because like if we're just trying to simplify this, I don't know what their maxes are there. Like we'll just use simple numbers. Like if you put $5 on it, I don't know. I guess I'm going to say it's still off based off, but I'll run some numbers and see.
Yeah, I'm curious, dude, because what I typically do is bet the top 5 or top 10 of whatever the guys like numbers suggest to me and go from there. So I'm kind of just having some fun with it and seeing where it goes. I've run some of my numbers as well, but I'm still intrigued as to what your thoughts are on this. So let's get into some gourmet or cray-cray, Spence. We've kind of burned through this in an hour. Let's kind of give me your favorite and your least favorite play for the 10K range, and we'll kind of try and touch on as many high, quick, bullet point typical situations here as we go down the ranges. So gourmet or cray-cray?
I would say my favorite play in the 10,000s would be Spieth. I would say my least favorite play would be Zalatoris.
Yes. If Spieth is one of the lowest owned in this 10K, I like Jason Day or Spieth. My least favorite is Zalatoris, ownership dependent. I know I'm cheating on my own rules that I made. 9K range, gourmet or cray-cray? This is hard. This was the range this question was made for.
Yeah, there's a lot to like and not a lot to dislike in this section.
I'll say cray-cray, Min Woo Lee, $9,400. I'm putting him in the same bucket as Willie Z, essentially. He makes tons of birdies, but I don't think his skill set's designed for this kind of a golf course.
I probably will double down and say that I'd like to see where the ownership lands. I guess I'll say that he is the worst play. I mean, he's the only player for me that's outside of the top 20 of my model in this $9,000 section. So, I mean, I guess just based off of the math, it has to be him just because I can't find another player. Sure. But I like Minwoo just fine here. I don't think he's a problem at low ownership. I guess for my favorite, I will go with Steven Yeager just because I like his upside a little bit better than Adam Scott, but I'm always aggressive with Steven Yeager.
Yep. I love Steven Yeager again.
See, I hit that on the head. That's the key to this of why I don't think he's a bad play. He's going to be low owned and he does have an upside to him with his skill set. Like it's hard for me to come on here and say that I'm out on him for that reason. It's just my model is it likes him the least would be the best way to say
vacuum.
In a vacuum situation, it likes him the least. Add ownership to the mix. And I think you're going to have some problems on some of these players where I'm probably just going to be out because of the lack of upside they have.
Yeah. Cool. I'm going to go with Benny On as my guy here. I just really like him. It was between him, Scott, and potentially Kim and Yeager. Lots of guys in the nines here. So glad we're getting that figured out. I saw Sia mentioning some D-Tree. He likes D-Tree in this 8, Spence, which we really haven't got too many of these 8s because they aren't in the top of our models, so for the most part at least. And I'm curious as to where you're going here. Cray-cray or gourmet?
My favorite would be Adam Schenk. I'll double down on that answer. My least favorite would be part of me wants to say KH Lee just because I think he's going to get wild ownership after winning this in back-to-back years to start. I will tentatively on a Monday show here without knowing what ownership is, say KH Lee.
As your
my least favorite.
Cool. Yeah. Funnily enough, I have an outright on KH Lee. I can't tell you exactly what. It's 70-1 on, because I woke up this morning, I looked at all the past champs and the course history guys, Jason Day, Siwoo Kim, Jordan Spieth, all like leading the top of the board in the outright market. KH Lee, he's popped for 2 top 10s this year already, and we know what he loves to do on this golf course. So at 70-1, that was an awesome buy-in for me. I don't mind that at all. Not necessarily going to go to him in this 8K range. My favorite is Jake Knapp as my gourmet. Now, I mean, not necessarily because I think his price is too high. I think his price is fine because this dude, like I mentioned, just to kind of summarize that, went from playing all these smaller tournaments, the non-designated event fields, to winning the Mexico and then just getting clumped into all these big boy tournaments. I think he's finally going to find himself in a field of his equivalent peers. Essentially, there's designateds might be a little too far for him as a rookie. I love him at $8,000. The guy's scoring an ups. I mean, the upside is, dude, it's uncapped in my opinion, with what he can do. So we'll see what he can do here. I don't mind Jake Knapp as my guy. My fade will probably be Mackenzie Hughes, Spencer.
Yeah,
I know
he's definitely in that mix for me. Like I mean, see, it might need to close his ears on this one. Like the three players for me that would be most likely to fade would probably be Dietrich Hughes, Cagely.
Yeah, cool. And give me one more favorite play, like Maverick McNeely. I know.
I like Maverick McNeely this week. I was very close to betting him in the outright market.
Yeah, I think so too. He's a fancy little play for me. I don't mind him $8,200. In the 7, Spencer, you won't find me touching Aaron Wright, $8,000 at a birdie fest. So don't even think that. In the 7, Spence, I'm going to go with Ryan Fox. I think I got him at like 125 to 1.
I want to.
Why? Yeah, I know. So this is the thing. Like I'm getting these crazy numbers, and 65 minutes into the show, I'm finally saying, take guys that aren't necessarily in the greatest form, but had a really good week last week at the Zurich. For some weird reason, there's going to be someone that played really well and reminded themselves, yes, I'm a good pro golfer. Look what I did last week when the pressure was just a little bit nullified because of my partner. Like I was playing some best ball golf, feeling it. Gary Kigo, Ryan Fox, both completely talented individuals. They finished 4th. I bet them top 3, Spence. So the first time I do it, it freaking bit me. But, I'm going to keep going through with that. Ryan Fox, supremely talented. On the DP World Tour, this guy's $7,600. If you rewind to the beginning of the year, when he just got his PGA Tour card and you put him $7,600 by Chan Kim and Ben Griffin and Justin Lower, you'd have told me you're crazy. This guy is so talented. He's been playing like shit on the PGA Tour. It's go time now. I think he's got his confidence. Love that number. Let's see what he can do.
You've sold me to not include him as my cray play because you bring up a lot of good points there. Like we've talked about Ryan Fox so frequently, you and I in private messages with one another. And I know we were both very high on him, and I've dropped him from every fantasy team. I never want to see him again. And maybe that's just a personal
pick him up again.
He's been picked up, unfortunately. Maybe it was you. Maybe it's secretly you in the league because I don't know who else would pick that guy up. But yeah, I mean, MP said like the $7,000 range, I think it's stacked with a lot of names, and I think there's a lot of really bad values to be found here too. Like you're going to find the best of the best values and the worst of the worst values. So I still like Peter Quest. Like I know that's a weird answer to give, but if you want to give a different one, and unfortunately I moved this number already, and I think it'll go back down because whenever data golf starts pushing it in the other direction, there's usually a buyback that occurs. But I took Garrett Higo at plus 121 over Ryo Hisatsune.
Okay.
That is now minus 110 both ways. I assume it's going to end up being pushed back up at some point, but even still, like this was Higo for me is kind of the Fox answer for you, to where maybe he found something. I think that from a statistical profile, he really fits this course.
Yeah.
I think for a player that I would fade, there's a lot, Byron. Like I was going to say Ryan Fox, but like I'm out on Luke List. I know that the distances people are going to want to play him. I always seem to incorrectly fade him. I think Ben Griffin, there's better spots for him. Michael Kim is probably overvalued at 7,200. Do you have thoughts on Schmid, Novak, and Stevens?
Novak seems like he's going to break through at some point, dude. It's just moving in that direction. He's shown us multiple high upside weeks or rounds at least. Schmidt, same thing, dude. I mean, he's been balling out. And who did you say your last guy was?
I saw MP in the chat say Schmid, Novak, and Stevens. Those are actually three players that I really like this week also. Like they were all inside of, I mean, Stevens is inside the top 25 of all 3 iterations. Schmid was inside the top 27 of all iterations. And then who was the other one? Novak. Novak was inside the top 25. I think for the price, you're getting value plays to consider. And that's kind of for me where the value really ended up landing in a lot of these spots.
Yeah. there's some very obvious guys like I don't mind Sam Ryder here either. You know, he was playing decent for a while. Charlie Hoffman in Texas, Spencer, I've got him at 125 to 1. You know, like, or 165 to 1, I think, is what I got Charlie Hoffman with that top 3, you know, insurance. So in Texas, I'm going, like, my outrights don't necessarily follow my model as much as I throw a lot more maniac involved there. Like this Ryan Fox thing. There's no way a model can pick that up because you don't even have stats to pull in from the Zurich.
You have to be a maniac to actually vet him. That's like the only thing we can say about that. And just to touch on the Hoffman thing, like I've never been beyond a shameless plug here. Take Adam Scott, Hoffman, Higo. These are all UNLV golfers that suit a Texas course very well.
Yes.
I'm always going to shout out UNLV golfers when I get an ability to, but I like the upside that Hoffman had in my model. I like the safety that Scott had. And I talked about Higo. I have a head-to-head bet against him. He was a top 20 player for me. There was a lot to like about him. So I think sometimes you just throw in certain conditions, some of these golfers see an upside. And that's kind of even touching back to what we talked about at the beginning of the show here. We have a weird schedule this year where players are not necessarily playing their natural schedule that they would have on tap. And you're getting some really awkward returns. And for some guys, it might be breaking them. For other players, I think we might be able to see them actually perform when they get the opportunity to. So there's a lot of names that fit that mix for me. And Higo's one of them. Like I'll double down or triple down again on Higo.
Yeah. I think Higo's graded 22nd and 21st for me, dude. So he's popping, man. And he's coming along nicely. I'm hoping he can really come through. We've got a lot of young South Africans. I guess he's not as young as the others, but South Africans need to start replacing. Loving what's going on there. So yes, Ian, this shirt is because of Spencer. It's been because of Spencer pretty much ever since I hit the Jake Knapp outright. So I've just been rocking it. You know, I'm the guy that gets the A on the team project that just shows up in the $100 bill shirt and just hypes up the rest of the squad. So I appreciate that. Spencer, in the 6s, where are we going with Gourmet and Cray Cray? Give me 3 a pop, and then we can kind of rattle off quickly however we're going there. Or as many as you feel comfortable with.
My model liked Matt Wallace from the Boomer Bust answer. Very low floor, but high ceiling for me of what if he's able to put it together. I had a similar return for Alex Smalley, which is the first time that I've gotten that answer in quite a bit of time. So 55th overall, 28th for upside, 102nd for safety. That safety number leaves a lot to be desired, but I'm kind of just trying to throw little darts in the section. I think Justin Sugg gives that exact same answer too there. I'll tell you who the worst values would be in the 6,000s. I mean, that's probably where I should point towards on this. So
yeah, let me double down on a few of your favorites before we dive into some of our negative guys. Sami Valimaki at 7,000 flat for me. I know it's the 6K range. I'm totally spaced out on that. I can't not mention Taylor Montgomery for DFS. Makes so many goddamn birdies. That's a putting festival. Let's see what he can do. I know his long irons are ass, but he's grading out really nicely for the birdie and easy scoring conditions. In the 6s, Dylan Wu, another nice option. I will second your Matt Wallace take there, Spence. Jimmy Stanger. Our man Millie Goats in the chat just saying Stanger. I don't mind him. You know, this guy's got tons of length, played nicely last week. Patrick Fishburne, another dude, not going to grade out well at all. Found himself right in the mix. Also found out he's friends with Taysom Hill from the New Orleans Saints, one of the craziest athletes in the NFL. Both went to that BYU power school. RIP to Zach Wilson there on the Jets. So Ryan Moore, did I mention his name? Don't mind him at all going down here. And then, yeah, those are going to be my favorites in the tops of the 60s. The 6K range is deep as balls, dude.
Do you want to guess where Taylor Montgomery and Ryan Moore went to school? I mean, it kind of proves my point. Like, there's a lot of UNLV golfers, obviously, on the tour, but these are all players that in Texas and during some of these swings see a positive return in investment in some of these spots. And I think Montgomery is probably the ultimate of if he puts it together, there's a high return. And if he doesn't, he's going to terribly miss the cut. But at a low enough ownership percentage, I'm fine buying into that. And my model liked Ryan Moore too. So I'm with you on pretty much all those names that you said.
Let's go, dude. Beautiful stuff. One final little Hail Mary is Rafael Campos, just a ball striking freak. Doesn't know how to putt. So we'll see what he can do. And I guess Rico Hoey's also been playing some solid golf as of
I
late.
liked him too. My model had him. Rico was 51st overall, 58th for upside. David Skins also graded well for me for whatever that's worth. But there are a lot of players, like if we're looking at the bad end of this for values that I don't necessarily want to be on, it's the names last week that produced, like if we want to say that some of these guys found something and they might be able to turn it in this week, I'm okay with that for the right player. I also think, though, we run into situations to where, I know this wasn't Billy Horschel's fault last week, but you get this built-in thing with Alexander to where they were just overgraded and overvalued in the market. And I kind of tend to believe that names like Martin Trainer, Zach Blair, players that were up there, like these are players that overproduced in a team setting, and each one of them is outside the top 65 of my model, and they'll probably garner more ownership than you would expect them to in these spots. So that's not what you want. You don't want to start chasing results.
No, that's exactly it. And especially in a volatile event like that, I'm not going to, the only thing I really want to validate on my very random thing about taking guys right off the Zurich, they need to have a decent long-term baseline that they can actually show you what they're made of before you get into them. Like I know I mentioned Patrick Fishburne, but Higo and Fox are like perfect candidates for that situation, like we've mentioned. So I don't mind them whatsoever. Let me finish up a few of my outrights that I forgot to mention here. I mentioned them all, so we're golden. It's all in the PGA Discord there for Roto Baller, but I will wrap them up one more time here. Benny On, Tom Kim, Ryan Fox, Charlie Hoffman, and KH Lee are my 5 guys right now. I've bet them all each way top 3, like I've mentioned at that Bet 365. So far, got Tom Hoagie, Adam Scott, top 20s. I've got Jake Knapp climbing that ladder, top 20, top 10, top 5. It's going all the way to the moon with this dude. I think I'm only risking shy of 3/4 of a unit anyway because his odds are so long. So his upside is through the moon. So I've got those 3 bets going right now. What else you got going on, Spence, on the betting side of things?
So I have Peter Quest at 100 to 1. I bet to win 12 units on that one. So that's going to be a little bit bigger of a payout there. I took Keith Mitchell and Hoagie, like I talked about, at 40 and 35 to 1. I'm lukewarm on those 2 calls at this point, but
one of them is going to be in the mix, dude. I know it.
Adam Schenk 50 to 1, Steven Yeager 33 to 1, and I'll let you be the ultimate call here on this. I talked about Higo as a head-to-head bet against Rio at plus 121. It's now minus 110. Wait for that number to move. I'm sure it will at some point. But do you have thoughts on Garrick Higo? I think that number is going to drift. Let's just say right now 125 to 1.
Yes.
I think I'm going to probably
the exact same thing as I'll get in there with you, dude, because I've got a bunch of long shots as well. So been looking to add a few. Been looking to add Jake Knapp as an outright, but I just, I don't feel like he's got it, but I've got enough exposure to him that I'll get him for the top 5. So we'll jump in with you there, Spence. If I want Garrick Higo on my fancy little each way 3 spots, let's take a quick peek and see what that looks like, because it's going to be interesting. What did you get him at? 125?
He's 100. I think he's 125 right now at BetMGM, unless that number's moved, but that's what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Well, I'm seeing him at 125 for that juiced up one. So I'm assuming BetMGM. That's nice. If you can just jump on that without the each way, coalition there, you're good to go. So love it, dude. Love that matchup as well. Rio. Remember how nicely his numbers were looking starting the year? Same as Ryan, man. These guys just from the DP just didn't translate. Mathieu Pavon shows up and wins. Golf is so bizarre, dude. It's so bizarre.
Higo is still 125 to 1. I double checked to make sure. So it's
beautiful. That's
the best number in the space right now. And I think it's just an overcorrection from what certain sites like Data Golf are putting out there, where they think he should be 300 and something one. Like, I massively disagree with that sentiment there.
By the way, I think Data Golf in this field has got Alex Noren as the highest graded guy, from what I remember. Just thought I'd mention that to you. No, it's Siwoo. I'm lying. But Alex Noren was 3rd. So he was right up there. Which will Data Golf, if you're looking for like a random projection of ownership, just go and take a look at Data Golf's projections for their player, not even the ownership projections, the actual grading of a player's outlook and the value associated with it. Their numbers move probably the market the most, outside
I
of
would
Spencer
agree.
Aguiar in the PGA Rotoballer Discord. Just kidding, but you know how you do with the matchups.
Well,
But
I
yeah,
mean, I've been having wars with them every single week where I move a number one way, they move it the other way. They usually get the best of it where they push it back, but like I feel like it's turned into a rotoballer versus data golf return for the last 5 or 6 tournaments because it keeps happening over and over again. And I
yeah,
think like for the most part, it's been 50-50 of who's been right, which is not maybe that's a if you're 50-50, you're not making money. So um in
sure.
most of
But
these
I mean, you
spots.
bet him at plus 122, so 50
That's a little
50 is
different of a
totally
situation
okay.
there, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's where a number makes a big difference. So,
Yeah.
Spence, thank you again. Anything else you want to mention to people before we get out of here?
No, I mean, I obviously if you're not doing so already, we would love you to check out everything that we have going on at Rotoballer. We have both Ians, we have both Joes, we have Matt, we have the two of
I'm going to
us.
change my name to Spencer.
Yeah, I mean, like I think if we can just keep doubling down at some point, it's like we'll just all be the same person. Like
Yeah.
Alex Roberts is the owner. Like we can all just be Alex before it's all said and done with it. But there's so much content that we're putting out
Yeah.
on a weekly basis. Like some of it's free, some of it's behind the paywall. Everything that you guys want to ask, though, is always going to be, we are more than willing to answer it. This is not one of those
Mhm.
situations to where like we come on this show because we want to have conversations with everybody. This is something that you and I do because we thoroughly enjoy having these discussions. And as I always say, like, thank you for everybody who does tune into the show. We look forward to continue growing it. There's a lot of different concepts that I know that we've had in mind of how to do it. And this model combat has been a very nice twist that we've added to it. But
Mhm.
I'm excited to keep growing this with you, Byron.
Absolutely, Spencer. And, I know you don't like to blow your own horn, so I will for you and say what a fantastic job you've done on the outrights this year. It's been so much fun to host the show with you. My shirt's getting faded. I've watched it so much the last little while. So I really appreciate that, Spence. Don't forget to hit the like button on the way out, guys. If you're looking to get on board with the PGA Rotoballer squad, we've got the weekly and the year-long subscriptions. If you jump on the year-long, you're going to get your best bang for your buck. If you don't like what you're seeing from us in the first few weeks, reach out to Alex, reach out to me, reach out to Spencer, bitch and moan, and you'll get your money back. You won't have to because we're going to give you a good product. That option and clause should always be there. We want you to feel comfortable investing in us to provide you with a good service. So I just want you to put that out there because some people might be a little turned off by the long term of that. So we do have 100% money back guarantee if you're in the mood for that kind of stuff. So you're not going to need it. Just putting it out there in case that was making you feel like you didn't want to get in for the full year. Awesome stuff, buddy. Let's have a great week at my golf tournament. We'll leave the CJ Cup out and just kind of think about the Byron. And let's see what we can do. It's going to be a fun week. I'm going to add 1 or 2 more outrights as we go here, but it's going to be an awesome week. Let's dig into those placements. Let's start seeing the good returns on our good long-term profitable markets there and have ourselves an awesome time. Don't forget to use code TOFF if you're looking for 10% off when you sign up with Rotoballer PGA today. Peace.